Now, here, this is Baruch at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and we're going to be learning Jewish astrology, and it's going to get a little bit more specific now. We're not just speaking philosophically about how astrology works. I like that line that he said, it's not astrology is not the problem is the astrologers. Let's take this chart. This is the symbol for Aquarius. And this particular chart has the ascendant in Aquarius. Now, let's just get an idea of what we're going here. Is that this is also called the first house. So the first house, the second house, the third house, the fourth house, because we're going always in astrology counterclockwise when we talk about the person's career and his life and his physical life. And Rabbi Yaakov is going to mention that now. So he says, let's take, for example, the concept which he's calling squaring the circle. Right? This is a circle, and squaring the circle, let's see what he means by that. So he said, if you start from the first house, here we have Aquarius, which is the person's ascendant, which we had said previously that he always insists that the basic sign of a person is their ascendant, because the ascendant underrides, so to speak, all the different aspects of the person's life. So because that's where it starts. So he says like this, let's go over here and let's see how the best I could do with this. Let me get it right over here. Maybe it'll be a little bit better. Let's see what Reb Yaakov says. If you start from the first house, which is the person's ascendant, which is called house number 1, he said then you go forward. Now, in the case of astrology, normal astrology, it would be counterclockwise, like this way. So he says if you go like this, you say, he said, which is house number 1. Then if you go forward, that's counterclockwise, its completion, that is the completion of the ascendant, will be in the physical realm, will be in the 10th house. So let's see how he does that, because that's the house of career, which is the person's career, his destiny. Then you start from the 10th house. We got up here to the 10th house. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th house here, in this case, is Scorpio. That's the sign of Scorpio. So he says, and we go another 10 houses. Let's take the 10th house, and let's count another 10. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is Leo. So now you have a combination of Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio as being the numbers 1 and 10. Well, excuse me, 1, 10 houses. He says, let me get my words straightened out here. So let's read Rabbi Yaakov. Then you start from the 10th house, and we go another 10 houses forward, which is counterclockwise, and you come to the 7th house. Now, the 7th house is known as your open enemies, which means your husband or your wife. That's what they normally say. So the 7th house is 10 houses away from the 10th house. So that's how we did it. This is the 7th house. How we know this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's counting from the original ascendant. Now you went 10, went up to Scorpio. You counted another 10, and you came around to the person's spouse. And then for the 7th house, if you go another 10, here's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you come to the house of Taurus. This is Taurus. The bull see his antlers there. If you go another 10, you come to the 4th house. And the 4th house is the house of the home. So this is the home of Taurus. Taurus is where you find the home. In this particular chart, in that home, you also find the person's sun and Mercury. So let's go on and see a little more. And the 4th house is the house of the home. So the first house is the person himself. That's the nature of the person, the root of the person. So is the person himself. And the 10th house is his career. Then the 7th house is going to be the person's marriage partner. And the 4th house represents his home. They come down here. And that is what is called squaring the circle. So that way you have touched all 4 angles of the horoscope, which circle while circling the chart. Now, what he meant by angles was that this is 90 degrees from there, right? And this is 90 degrees from there. And this is 90 degrees from there. So each one, that's called an angle. It's a 90-degree angle. So therefore, this is an angular chart that shows you those ideas. Now, all of what he wants to say, got a lot more to say. So he says, now let's look at it again. It's just to give you another idea of how this works. He says, I'm going to show you that when you go forward, or in a counterclockwise way, you are talking about things manifesting in a more material and physical way, in a worldly way. For example, the house next to the first house, so let's say this house like this is Aquarius. The next house, which is Aquarius, is the person himself. He just said that. The next house is going to be the house of money. In this particular case, after Aquarius comes Pisces. So he says the house next to the first house, for example, if the house next to the first house, if you're going forward, which is counterclockwise, is the second house, which is the house of money. And so already here you can see that the counterclockwise way reveals the material aspect of life, because money, which is the second house, is what the person, the first house, needs to make it in this world. So in order to have a good time in this world, an easy time, and fulfill your needs, the first thing you need is money. So to see the material manifestation of the chart, you go forward. That is, we call this, in astrology, he calls this going forward. This is how astrologers work. They go forward. So he says forward, which is counterclockwise. And from the first house to the second house, to the third house, to the fourth, etc., one by one. Now, if you go the other way, so let's just understand, he just said 1, 2, 3, 4, just for example. That's how you count. But there's another way to do this, and that's called clockwise. So he says backwards or clockwise from the first house. So that if you go backwards, which in our system, or the astrological system, is called clockwise, from the first house to the 12th, so if you go here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you come to the to the 12th house. Now let's see what he says. Clockwise from the first house to the 12th, and then the 11th house, going back or going that way. You were talking about things manifesting in a more spiritual way. And he gives an example. For example, you go backwards from the first house. So backwards would be going this way. So it would be going from Aquarius to Capricorn. You get the 12th house. So what happens, let's say, this house, in other words, this is the first house. The one right behind it is going to be the 12th house. There are 12 houses, which is the house of secret enemies. Now, my teacher once told me, what is the worst enemy of the person? Do you think it's a person's body? He says, no, it's the person's soul. Now, let me see. I'm losing this screen because I don't read off of the screen. I read out of the book, and you have to excuse me. Terribly sorry, and we'll try to keep going the right way. So what's the worst thing what is the worst enemy of the person? Do you think it's the person's body? He says, no, it's the person's soul. The body wants the pleasures of this world, and the soul doesn't. It wants to get back to its source in the upper worlds. It wants a spiritual existence, and it wants to stay pure. And this is one reason it is called the house of the secret enemy. Why? Because it is the house of the soul. In other words, the 12th house and the first house make together a person. So in other words, a person has a body, and he has a soul within the body. Now, let me move this up a little bit so we can make sure we get it. So he says, because it is the house of the soul. In other words, the 12th house and the first house make together a person. The first house is the body, and the 12th house is the soul. And if you looked at each house with the house before it, going backwards or clockwise, so if you go everything this way, the house that's before it, this is another kind of way of backward. But you see, they make some logical combinations. So if you take the squaring the circle system and apply it using the backward or clockwise method, which goes after the soul and a more spiritual approach, because right away when you go to the first house, it's going to be the house of the soul. And then the count of 10 houses clockwise from the first. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is going to be the 10th house. So he says that what you have from the first house brings you to the 4th house, because the actual counting, if you count it another way, is 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the material sense, this is now the 4th house. So what's that all about? And if you count another 10, let's count another 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you see that the first house fulfills itself in the 7th house. Now let me see, maybe I counted it wrong. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I counted it right this way. I went the wrong way. Don't go the wrong way. Go the right way. So this is clockwise. So the spiritual path goes clockwise. And once again, you're back with the person's spouse again. Fills itself in the 10th house. And the 10th house fulfills itself in the 1st house. How do we see that? So let's see. We're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's the place of the 10th house, which is the house of career. So it says what we see like this. He says the 4th house itself in the 7th house, and another 10. You see that the 7th house fulfills itself in the 10th house, and the 10th house fulfills itself in the 1st house. Now let me count this again. Here's the 10th house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You're back in the 1st house again. So he says, fills itself in the 1st house. So this is another way of squaring the circle. So what we did, just in conclusion, because it's a little bit, I'm not an expert at this. I'm reading what Reb Yaakov says. The 1st house is Aquarius. We count going this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we count another 10 from that position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Back to Leo again. And then another 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's where it's supposed to be. And then from here you count another 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're back over here. I think that was a wrong count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Fine. I can't count. So anyway, that's one way of doing it. And then the other way is to go this way. Now, if you know the combinations, and actually what's the nature of the sun, what's the nature of Taurus? Say, for example, this is the house of Taurus. What's the nature of Mercury? And what's the nature of Taurus? What does Mercury have to do with the sun? And so all of that are different things that the astrologers can do to understand, which I'm trying to understand, to be able to work with this system and get an idea of what's going on with people. This is Baruch Fleischman. We'll keep going at it and try to get better.